I'm gonna get straight to the point, and as you can tell by the thumbnail, I think it's Zen's Discord, but I'm gonna have to do a lot of explaining, so bear with me. So this video was inspired by a TF2 content creator called Fishstick, who made a similar video but obviously to do with TF2, and I will actually be using some of his video to help justify the reasoning I've made. I recently polled you guys on what you thought the best ability in Overwatch was between Immortality Field, Discord, Resurrect, Matrix, and any other ability I couldn't mention, which was predominantly on as Nade and Sombra's Hack, which I would have put in the poll, but unfortunately, YouTube only allows 5 options. Spylo, who's the assistant coach for the London Spitfire, actually put forward Hack as well. So let's start off with, what does best even mean? Does best mean the strongest or most powerful ability in the game? What about the most well-designed ability in this game? Because if that was the definition, one could argue that D.Va's Matrix is quote-unquote better than BAP's Immortality Field, for example. Well, for the purposes of this video, I'm referring to the strongest or most powerful ability in this game, but even that definition is too vague. How do we measure what strong is? Strongest at what level? Bronze or pro play? Strongest in terms of raw damage, pure utility, or both? Strongest in terms of versatility, or being able to do one thing better than anyone else? And not only do you have to consider those factors, but also which of those factors are also most important. Is pro play more important than bronze play? And if so, why? Is utility more important than the level of play? And if so, why? So as you can see, the categories for what is considered to be the best or strongest ability can be complex to navigate. However, my solution to this is just to, well, steal and adapt Fishstick's own criteria for judging the power of an ability in the game. Essentially, the best or strongest abilities in the game come down to what provides the highest rewards for the lowest cost possible. The reason why this is actually a pretty good measurement is due to how flexible this is, due to how many sub-factors this accounts for. Both damage and utility count as a reward, for example. This economical measurement is also pretty practical, easy to understand, and takes into account the cost of abilities rather than just the raw rewards, which prevents us from placing abilities in a vacuum. For example, say we invested 50 cents into Elon Musk's favorite cryptocurrency, Dogecoin, and say that we actually made $50,000 the next day, so the cost is 50 cents and the reward is $50,000. Say we also made a similar investment where we actually put 10 cents into Dogecoin at a different time and we end up making $40,000. Whilst we would have made more money and more reward with the first investment, we could argue that the second investment is proportionally more worth it and therefore better because of the lower cost. Obviously, if you put 50 cents instead of 10 cents, we would have made $200,000. This also brings up an interesting debate, because both the costs of 50 cents and 10 cents are both really low, so it doesn't really matter, and honestly, you'd be right, but when we're talking about dozens of abilities in Overwatch, we need to be splitting hairs between costs. I'm not trying to argue that abilities such as D.Va's Matrix, Mercy's Resurrect, Ana's Nade, BAP's Immortality Field, Zarya's Bubble, Sombra's Hack, or other abilities are weak compared to Discord. In fact, they're all really strong in their own regards, but I'm going to have to split hairs when it comes to picking one ability to be victorious. So, let's operationalize, which is just a fancy word for measuring what the costs actually are. Fishstick details 4 categories in what counts as a cost, and I'll play the clip of him describing those here. If you don't get the TF2 references, don't worry, I'll make references back to Overwatch and Zen's Discord.
The first cost, of course, is skill, or what amounts to long-term effort. If something takes a lot of practice to get right, then players who do get it right should be rewarded for it with higher impact. Headshots, air blast, rocket jumping, and double donks are all great examples of this. The next cost factor is risk. Are you putting yourself at risk in order to complete your task? If you are, then you should be rewarded accordingly. Getting a meat shot as scout, going in for a backstab, going for a market gardener kill, and even WM1 are all high-risk plays with potentially great rewards. The third cost is one that is very common in a lot of games and genres: immediate time investment. This usually comes in the form of cooldown. The final cost is resource management. This one usually overlaps with time investment since cooldowns are usually single-use resources, but this also applies to many factors like health for things like rocket jumping, ammo for weapons with lower ammo counts like the Huntsman, metal for engineers, and cloak for spies.
Let's apply this back to Overwatch, and more so to Zen's Discord, and why I think this fulfills all the criteria for having a very low cost. I'll also be comparing Discord to other abilities that got voted highly, such as Ana's Nade, Sombra's Hack, D.Va's Matrix, BAP's Immortality Field, and maybe Mercy's Resurrect. For mechanical costs, or long-term effort as Fishstick describes, Discord really does not require any mechanical skill at all to apply. Just look at an enemy, click on one button, and done. However, all the other abilities have also a relatively low mechanical cost. The only notable one is maybe D.Va's Matrix, because we've all seen that absolutely crazy flick done by Fury back in 2019, when he 180 flicked to eat a grab with a shred of his Matrix, but most commonly, this will never be done. Maybe the ability to place lamp on corners in a fraction of a second make it slightly higher than Discord, but it's honestly not an absolute absolute deal breaker here. What I do think this illustrates though is that all of these abilities that I've just mentioned are very powerful in their own regard, and part of that is due to their low mechanical costs. You look at something like a Widowmaker headshot for example, and the mechanical costs are relatively high. Just to add something into the edit here, you can't really mess up Discord, but you can mess up things like Matrix, you can mess up things like Immortality Field, and part of that is because of the slight mechanics. So moving on to risk versus rewards, this is by far the broadest category, which will require more development, but the risk of applying Discord is very low. You could be up to 35 meters away and still apply the ability. The reward, however, is very high. When we consider that Discord is most commonly and best effectively used on flanks, Discord applies a 25% damage vulnerability to the desired enemy, giving a massive advantage to whoever is on that flank. So why is winning a flank such a high reward? Well, it gives your team map control, meaning it allows your team to take multiple angles around the map to then collapse upon the enemy. For example, on Route 66 by the lorry on 3rd point, if there are two DPS players dueling, placing a Discord massively reduces the risk of your DPS losing that duel, allowing you to then gain that space. IoStucks also details this implicitly in his video of dynamic RVR assessment, also known as risk versus reward, with regards to duels and matchups. A link to his video will be in the top right or in the description. From there, after your DPS wins that duel, your team can then surround the enemy from multiple different angles, which is important because if you're getting shot in multiple different directions, you just simply can't hide around a corner. Linking this back to Discord Orb, that ability allows this to occur in the first place, and a decent example of this is in the grand finals of the Overwatch League 2021, where the Shanghai Dragons just absolutely surrounded the Atlanta Rain constantly. Here's a clip from my Shanghai Dragons video analysing this, and please do keep in mind that everything I say is partially due to Discord's ability to control those flanks in the first place. Now the Rain are left in one big clump on point, allowing the Dragons to deepen and take more angles. You can see this in Fletter's POV, with Fate rolling through the Rain on Ball, Lip taking a nice angle with range and cover on Sombra, Izayaki rotating to Catwalk on Zenyatta, and of course, Fletter's own angle on Tracer. If you want to know what to do here if you're the Rain, I'd probably rewind all the way back to the first rush, and to look to rush through Catwalk instead of rushing through points. The reason for this, as you can see, is that this should give the backline of Rain some more cover. Right now, Iris is just in the middle of point being surrounded by 4 angles, and to no one's surprise, the Rain loses 5. There's a reason why, in the traditional Bull Zen comp, you have to keep Bull and Zen, but you can swap every other hero. You could swap Brig for Mercy, the DPS slots could be Sombra, Tracer, Echo, Ashe, Cassidy, and the other tank pick aside from Bull could be Sigma, Zarya or D.Va. But 99% of the time, you have to keep the Zen because of how powerful Discord is for keeping that flank control. Now let's compare the reward and maybe risk of Discord to things like Matrix, Nade, and BAP's Immortality Field. Let's start off with Nade since that's the easiest. Nade has one of the highest rewards in the game, and a well-placed Nade can single-handedly change a teamfight. There's no doubt about that. Nade also carries a notably higher risk than something like Discord. To land a good Nade on Ana, you'll need to take a somewhat greedy off angle timed for when your team pressures, and even then, there might be a competent D.Va or DPS who will eat the nade or contest your angle. For example, referring back to that Route 66 example, say your team are pushing on last point and you need to land a big off angle nade. Going up the side of the truck can be risky, and up against the top level D.Va, you might not even get the rewards. However, in more conventional case uses, such as Numbani first point defense, you could argue that this risk is minimized because of how far you are away. Again though, I believe that as long as their tanks are competent enough to play around the shielding, and as long as the D.Va is aware of the nade coming, the reward is minimized. You will probably get the healing effect of nade off, but the reason why I'm not really talking about that too much or placing too much emphasis on the healing is because I believe that reward is smaller than the reward given from something like Discord. Not to mention, I think it's a lot easier to get a high reward from nade when playing up against a Brawlio comp that likes to play together a bit more, rather than playing up against a comp that likes to play a bit more split, i.e. up against poke dive. Again, Ana's love to take off angles when trying to get a good aggressive nade, but when there's Discord on the field and their Zen is controlling the flanks, that'll be a lot less accessible for you to do on Ana. Now, let's move on to BAP's Immortality Field. The risk is pretty low, and I don't think I need to explain why, considering BAP is almost always played in Brawl, and you should be a reasonable distance from your Reinhardt to avoid any meaningful damage. And yeah, the reward is pretty high considering your Reinhardt literally gets a get out of jail free card, but I think the reward of something like Immortality Field is a bit overstated if you're playing Brawl into a poke dive matchup. Let's take that Shanghai vs Atlanta game in the grand finals for example, where Shanghai engulfed the Rain by surrounding them. Say Atlanta's Reinhardt, Gator, got to low HP, which he did, and Iris and Baptiste is forced to use Immortality Field. Sure, you prevent your Reinhardt from dying momentarily, but think about it. Are you really fixing the issue here? Are you turning the fight just from lamping there? All lamp really does is delay the inevitable from happening, considering you haven't got flank control, so you'll still keep taking damage even after your Immortality Field goes down, and you will lose the fight regardless. So, the long-term rewards of lamp I'd argue are a bit limited, especially when compared to something like Discord, because lamp is only only really delaying the inevitable instead of changing it. And I believe Temple, a professional Overwatch coach, implies this with his video explaining why poke dive beats literally every comp in the game, and it's partially because of the long-term rewards of flank control, which I've explained before, Zen's Discord will help in, beating any short-term advantage other compositions may have most of the time. Now finally, let's compare the risk and reward of D.Va's Matrix. In Brawl, D.Va's Matrix is best used on off angles during a team fight to be able to see and eat cooldowns. A really good example of this would be on Volskaya first point defense, where D.Va flies up in the middle section to be able to eat key cooldowns such as Flashbang, Sleep Dart, Nades, Dynamite even, and way more. Now this reward I believe is slightly lower than Discord because the reward you receive just depends upon what the enemy team are running, but it can still be game changing. The risk however is definitely higher than something like Discord because you're having to physically put yourself at visible risk to draw attention from the front line. This could mean a chunk of your HP gets taken off at least, or you might even get demeched if you stay for too long. In Dive, D.Va's Matrix is primarily used to allow Winston to enter and exit a dive without taking too much damage. A good example of this would be a Watch Point Gibraltar attack, where you Matrix your Winston during his jump, Matrix any cooldowns such as Nade when he lands, and then when your Winston disengages, you Matrix him out. This obviously has a pretty decent reward for literally keeping your Winston alive, but the reward is comparable to things like a Zarya bubble. Zarya bubbles are used over Matrix against comps with higher CC to protect against things like Briggs whip shots. In contrast, with Zen's Discord, there aren't really other abilities that are comparable or are viable alternatives to Discord. Yet again, referring back to that Route 66 example in terms of controlling that flank, things like Moira's Orb, Honor's Nade, Briggs Repair Pack, or even Bap's Immortality Field are unparalleled to what Discord can do in a duel. And even if you argue that things like Immortality Field are better for dueling and controlling a flank, there are other costs which nicely leads me onto cooldowns. For time investment or just cooldowns, obviously Zen Discord has literally no cooldown and a minimum duration of 3 seconds when you break line of sight. In contrast, Bap's Immortality Field has a cooldown of 30 seconds and a maximum potential duration of 5.5 seconds. Now, you could argue that this cost isn't really significant since you're going to use Bap's Lamp once throughout a single team fight, but this is still a factor to keep in mind if you waste Bap's Lamp, as that's it, there's no second chance if you do mess up. The last category that Fishstick mentioned was resource management. This is a bit harder to actually apply to Overwatch, so I'll be adapting it to resource creation or denial. Resources is quite a vague term, but often it's used to refer to any possible advantage, aid, or assistance that you can create for your team or deny from the enemy team, which is kind of similar to the Google definition. This is most commonly damage, healing, utilities such as stun effects, speed, or heal debuffs, space or map control, and attention. For example, Matrix can deny resources from the enemy team, such as Honor's Nade. Matrix can also be used to indirectly create resources by drawing attention, which is a resource, off the front line and onto D.Va directly. Bap's Lamp can deny any form of damage in the game, but only temporarily, as I explained prior. Mercy's Resurrect can create resources by literally bringing another player back to life, and also denying any resources that killed that player in the first place. Sombra's Hack denies resources on a player by making them unable to use their abilities, although they can still heal and damage through their weapon. But arguably, Zen's Discord creates the most amount of resources in the game by being able to dictate which space and areas of the map you want to control, as amateur coach and content creator Lucid explains here. Basically rewording what I said prior about Discord allowing you to control flanks, this also denies the resources of space from the enemy team, and also allows your DPS to get free damage from those very flanks and off angles that you control. To hammer in this even more, his former Overwatch League coach for the LA Gladiators, Deepe, showing how important space control is, and Discord's ability to contribute to that.
Discord is how you kill things in this comp. Discord is the most broken ability in the game if used correctly. It cuts everyone's HP by 30% basically. Fundamental number one, think about how much side space can you control. The side space is the most important thing in Overwatch. If there's a pie, you don't want to be at their side, our side. What you want it to look like is this. I own 66% of the pie. I own something greater than 50%. How can I own more of the pie relative to the point, relative to wherever we're fighting? Right now, we need to have a Tracer, a D.Va, a Ball, somewhere over on this side. Make them look over here. Control this side space. Control this side space. Control this. The question is, why can Outlaws hold this chunk? Basically, the difference in their comp is the supports and the main tank, right? These guys need to follow people to heal them. How do you heal Tracer in this comp? Moira has to mouse one her. Maybe toss a 10,000 mile orb away, but that's a big cooldown. What does this guy have to do? He just press shifts and he's still doing full damage. This comp is the best at holding all the side space in the entire game. Maybe you switch this out for Sigma, maybe you switch this out for Ash, maybe you switch this out for Mercy. It's all the same concept. You can own all the side space.
Before I end off the video, I want to make it clear that it's completely reasonable to think other abilities are stronger or better based off different criteria, because if you ask different high level coaches or players, you're always going to get a different response. So let me know your thoughts down below and whether I've been able to convince you or not. I'll definitely be replying to a lot of comments, so hopefully we can get some nice discussion going on. And until next time.